You need to hear this if you're a history buff. Okay, let's start with the basics. Everyone knows the story of Christopher Columbus, right? Sets sail in 1492, bumps into the Americas, thinks he's found a shortcut to India, classic Columbus. But here's the thing, he wasn't exactly the first European to set foot in the Americas. I mean, the indigenous people were already there, but that's a whole other story for another time. Before Columbus, there was Leif Erikson, a Viking dude with a name that sounds like a character from a Tolkien novel. This intrepid explorer sailed over from Greenland around the year 1000. That's roughly 500 years before Columbus decided to spice things up. They called this new land Vinland, which, let's be honest, sounds way cooler than America. Seriously, Vinland sounds like a magical place filled with talking trees and rivers of mead. It was probably more like Newfoundland, which, don't get me wrong, is beautiful and all, but not exactly what comes to mind when you think of epic Viking sagas. So why don't we hear about Leif and his Vinland adventures in history class? Well, for starters, the Vikings didn't exactly stick around. They explored the coast, hung out for a bit, and then decided, nah, not for us. Now let's fast forward a few centuries and talk about the first permanent European settlements in what is now the United States. Most textbooks say it was Jamestown, Virginia, established in 1607, but the first was St. Augustine, Florida, founded in 1565 by the Spanish. While the English struggled, the Spanish thrived in sunny Florida. St. Augustine is beautiful, gorgeous beaches, charming architecture, and a rich history. So, why does Jamestown get all the glory? Well, the English won control of North America, but we shouldn't forget St. Augustine's place in American history. Speaking of forgotten settlements, let's talk about Roanoke, the OG ghost town that's been giving historians nightmares for centuries. Picture this. The year is 1587, and a group of English settlers arrive on Roanoke Island, off the coast of what is now North Carolina. They build houses, plant crops, and even have a couple of babies. You know, the usual pioneer stuff. Then, things get weird. The colony's leader, John White, sails back to England for supplies, leaving behind his family and the rest of the settlers. When he returns 3 years later, everyone is gone, vanished. Poof! The only clue, the word CROATOAN carved into a tree. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just eerie silence and that cryptic message. So, what happened to the Roanoke colonists? Theories abound, ranging from the plausible to the downright bizarre. Did they assimilate with a local Native American tribe called the CROATOAN? Were they attacked by Spanish explorers? Did they get bored and decide to start a new life in the wilderness, becoming the original American hipsters? The truth is, we may never know what happened to the lost colony of Roanoke. Okay, let's talk about everyone's favorite summer holiday, Independence Day. Fireworks, barbecues, questionable fashion choices involving the American flag. It's a grand old time. But what if I told you that we might be celebrating Independence Day on the wrong day? The Continental Congress actually voted to declare independence on July 2nd, 1776. That's right, 2 whole days before the date we all remember. The official declaration wasn't adopted until July 4th. John Adams was adamant that July 2nd was the real Independence Day. He even refused to celebrate on the 4th, but hey, we get it, John. July 4th just sounds better, so, while we may be celebrating on the wrong day, let's remember John Adams, the true patriot. Chapter 5. The White House. From firetrap to, well, still a bit of a firetrap. The White House, that iconic symbol of American democracy, power, and, surprisingly, flammable building materials. Okay, maybe that last one isn't as well known, but it's true. The White House we know and love today wasn't always the pristine white beacon of freedom it is now. In fact, it went through a bit of a rough patch during the War of 1812. See, in 1814, those pesky Brits decided to pay a little visit to Washington, D.C., and, well, they weren't exactly there for a friendly cup of tea. They set fire to several government buildings, including the White House. And let's just say the fire department wasn't exactly equipped to handle a blaze of that magnitude back then. So, the White House was left a bit worse for wear, with charred walls and a distinct smoky aroma. Not exactly the best look for the leader of the free world. So, what did they do? Did they rebuild from scratch? Did they hire a team of fancy architects to restore it to its former glory? Nope, they went with the simplest solution, a fresh coat of paint. Chapter 6. John Hanson, the president you've never heard of. Alright, time for another history-shaking revelation. George Washington wasn't the first president of the United States. I know, blasphemy. But hear me out. Before the Constitution, before the whole we the people thing, there was the Articles of Confederation, America's first attempt at a government. And under these Articles of Confederation there was a president, not George, but a man named John Hanson. You know, John Hanson, the guy whose face is definitely not on any money or statues or, well, anything really. John Hanson, President of the United States in all but name. He served his term, presided over the Continental Congress, and generally did all the presidential things, except maybe chop down a cherry tree. So why is John Hanson relegated to the footnotes of history, while George Washington gets all the glory? Well, the Articles of Confederation were kind of a mess. They gave too much power to the states, not enough to the federal government, and basically made it impossible to get anything done. Chapter 7. Alaska from Seward's folly to strategic genius. Let's journey to the icy north, to the land of glaciers, grizzlies, and surprisingly good coffee, Alaska. Now we all know Alaska is part of the United States, but it wasn't always that way. In fact, it used to be owned by Russia. And in 1867, Secretary of State William Seward made a deal that had everyone scratching their heads and calling him crazy. He bought Alaska from Russia for a whopping $7.2 million. That's right, for the price of a decent Manhattan apartment today, the US acquired a landmass twice the size of Texas. Now, at the time, people thought Seward had lost his mind. They called it Seward's Folly, Seward's Icebox, and other creative nicknames that basically boiled down to, what were you thinking? I mean, Alaska was a frozen wasteland, right? Nothing but ice, snow, and maybe a few polar bears. Well, as history would prove, Seward had the last laugh. Turns out Alaska was full of natural resources, gold, timber, oil, you name it. Suddenly, Seward's Folly didn't seem so foolish anymore. And let's not forget Alaska's strategic importance. It's right next door to Russia, which during the Cold War made it a pretty important piece of real estate. Chapter 8. Keep it curious. So there you have it. The US is full of surprises, mysteries, and some epic misunderstandings. From Vikings who thought America wasn't cool enough to the almost Independence Day, history is anything but boring. Which one blew your mind the most? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell. Who knows? We might uncover even weirder history next time. Until then, keep it curious. And remember, history is full of surprises. Stay curious and keep exploring.